Hi, and thanks for joining us for another Q&A Friday, a regular series where we chat about issues facing manufacturing companies in the new world of Industry 4.0. I'm Jessica Vaughton, a team member here at Mountain Point, and I'm joined by Beth Banning-Taylor, a digital project manager. Happy Friday, Beth.
Happy Friday, Jess.
So, Beth, we're really excited to have you on the show because you've worked as a digital project manager and business analyst for numerous organizations, both through your work at Mountain Point and in other roles. And interestingly, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've only been doing this less than a year, right? But you've already got a huge number of projects under your belt. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is fair to say. I think I just passed my year mark for when I started working with my first clients in this particular role. So it's been a fast and amazing year.
Wonderful. Well, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on, because you have a lot of sort of lessons learned from your first year of working with clients and guiding them through the digital transformation journey. And so we wanted to hear what some of those are. So what I'd like to talk about today is what you've learned in terms of what it really takes to implement a successful digital transformation project. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so first of all, let's talk about expectations, because I think that's where things kind of start to go off the rails almost from the get-go. Is I think a lot of people undertaking these efforts are caught off guard by the level of investment that's required, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of time and attention. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, that is definitely the thing that I think most people are caught off guard by. And it's not just investment of time from senior leadership within your company. You really need to also invest some time from really lots of different key roles within your organization. So, we don't need to just talk to people in sales when we're doing, a Salesforce implementation, for example. We also need to talk to people in accounting or, marketing, other roles. So that is definitely what takes most of our customers off guard, is that amount of time and energy needed to truly drive this sort of change within organizations. Because it's really not just about technological changes. It's also imperative to create that new culture within the organization that's open to ongoing change, because, obviously technology changes constantly. And we also need to be able to drive adoption while ensuring that all the new processes that we're creating are customer centric. Another thing that I've often found is that many companies try to silo that implementation process. Executives either want to handle the entire process on their own without enough input from the end users, or they want to hand off the project to their IT or sales teams. But the most successful implementations have input from every level and division within a company, with everyone focused on a common goal.
Right. Because, there's a reason we call it like the fourth industrial revolution. This isn't just a small tweak or tinkering. These are major overhauls, and a lot of them require a huge shift in thinking and a big cultural shift in the organization. One of the things that I wanted to mention, you mentioned making sure that everything is customer centric, and I think that alone is a big change. And that's actually what we consider to be the major driver of the fourth industrial revolution, is this whole Amazon effect of customers being at the very center of every process and having, these personalized responses, this immediate response. And although manufacturing companies have always strived to satisfy the customer, in past decades, a lot of times they've been at least one step removed, right? So there's usually been a distributor or at least an outside sales team kind of in between the process, and a lot of those walls are being torn down. So that's a big change too, I think.
Definitely. And just the immediacy with which, most consumers and customers expect to receive responses and, meaningful engagement from the companies that they do business with is totally different now than it was even, 5 or 10 years ago. And the companies that are doing a good job of that are really setting themselves apart and setting themselves up for success. So that's a big part of the work that we do at Mountain Point, is really helping manufacturers see from the customer's perspective exactly what they need to implement to create those meaningful engagements.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk a little bit more about some of the steps that you need to take in order to kind of begin that cultural change or to start building buy-in. How do you approach that process?
Sure. So we use the agile development method with all of our projects so that the solution can be adapted based on discoveries during the development process. So no project is truly linear. But the way that we start is always with creating a vision and setting goals for the overall project and identifying what success is going to look like for the stakeholders. Once we've done that, then we begin the define design process. And during the initial discovery sessions, I'll meet with all those stakeholders to gather the requirements and start writing what we call user stories. And we use those so that we can map out exactly what we want to accomplish for all of the stakeholders during the project. So once I've met with all the relevant teams, I'll take all of the feedback and identify areas of opportunity to streamline processes or improve customer experiences. And a huge part of gathering that feedback and taking part in those meetings is so that everyone knows that their voice is being heard during the initial phases of the project and that we're actually addressing concerns from all of the relevant teams and really taking everyone's feedback into account when we start building the solution.
Okay. And so that's, again, that cultural shift, right? Making sure that everybody is part of the conversation, on board with where you want to go, because if you don't have that at the start, it's going to be hard to get it later on as well, I would imagine.
Exactly. And a lot of teams that I've worked with in the past have gone through a couple of attempts at digital transformation projects. So there's sometimes not a lot of trust in that process. So creating that trust from the get-go with those teams so that they know that I'm actually listening and that their feedback actually matters is really important. And then making sure that the solution responds to their concerns as well so that they're actually going to use it. Because if you're not doing that, you're not going to be able to get the buy-in once you roll the solution out to the teams.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, let's get into the specifics. So if you're a client and you've hired Mountain Point to guide you through a process, you've talked about sort of how to begin the problem solving piece. What happens from there? What can they expect long-term throughout this project?
Sure. So once we've gathered all that initial information, I'll use it to create a project plan. And we'll set a project timeline with milestones, and we'll also create a regular meeting cadence with the core project team. Typically those are weekly, but sometimes they're more often. And we'll hold additional Q&A meetings to demo functionality as we build it and gather feedback. So once we've agreed on the user stories and requirements and I've developed that project plan, we'll start developing the solutions, and testing will begin immediately on each piece of development as we finish it. So as users test, we're still building following pieces of the solution, and ongoing changes and enhancements are made. Once we've gone through that process for all of the user stories identified during the define design sessions and those that we've uncovered during development, we'll move on to user acceptance testing. So during that phase, we'll provide the teams with scenarios to test the solution and gather feedback. After final changes, we'll deploy it. During the final phases of UAT, we're also developing the training plan for rolling everything out to the end users. It's so important to have a solid training plan and ongoing communication about the solution and what's working, and gather feedback about what isn't working. Being able to address issues or gaps quickly is important so that trust is never lost in the solution. And then many companies that we work with choose to engage us beyond the deployment to further assist in driving user adoption and ongoing feature enhancements.
Awesome. So what advice would you give somebody who's looking to lead this sort of change or lead this sort of project at their company? So you always have a counterpart working on the client side, right? What advice would you give somebody who's new to this?
To start the process with an open mind and work with a consultant that has experience within your industry are probably the two most important things that someone can do. These technologies are changing rapidly, and working with a partner that is well-versed in the many ways these flexible frameworks can be leveraged to best support your business, both today and how to keep that solution scalable for your changing business needs, is so important. And also be prepared to bring every department into the process. Make sure that everyone understands why this transformation is so important for the future of your business.
Awesome. Well, Beth, thanks so much. Thanks for your insight. I think you've done a great job of kind of outlining what people can expect who are starting these sorts of organizational change efforts at their companies. And so thanks for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me.
And for those of you listening, if you have a question you'd like us to answer or a topic you want us to tackle, let us know. We can be reached on our social media channels. You can email us, you can call us. We always love your feedback. Also, really eager to hear what advice you might share for people who are going through this for the first time or even multiple times. If you've been through it before and have some insight, we'd love to hear it. So thanks, everyone, and happy Friday.